Welcome to the Moved to Meditate podcast. I'm your host, Addie D. Hilster. If you're a yoga practitioner or teacher who knows that there's more to yoga than poses, but you're wondering where to find that, come join our quiet little party. Here you'll find resources to help you deepen your practice, as well as insightful conversations with yoga, movement, and meditation teachers from a range of traditions. On this podcast, we spotlight the more contemplative aspects of movement practice. So we talk about all things gentle yoga, meditation, yin, restorative, yoga therapy, mindfulness, and more. Listen in and connect to a community of like-minded practitioners. Hello and welcome, everyone. Thanks for tuning into the podcast today. This episode is all about the concept of grounding, which is going to be our next monthly deeper dive theme. So I hope it's something you'll be interested in. And I'll talk about what I mean when I use the term grounding or to ground, why it's really helpful as a practice, how we get ungrounded, and I'll give lots of ideas for grounding practices you can try. And it's hot up here in Washington today. So it's supposed to go up to about 100 degrees, which is really toasty for us here. So I need to do this recording now so I can open the door and turn my fan back on. Hey, it's all part of the fun of podcasting. And if you are finding this podcast helpful and or enjoyable, I would love to request that you share it and help me get the word out to others who might be into these topics. It is extremely helpful when you post a rating and a review on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. That really helps boost the show in the search of that platform so people will find it. And it's also amazing when you share your favorite episodes on social media or just tell your friends. Hey, and if you do that, maybe you can nerd out together. And if your friend listens, you can have a fun conversation topic to get into together. I know it's an honor to have you recommend this content to others, and I really do appreciate it. As I mentioned, this episode today will kick off our deeper dive theme for August. I can't believe it's almost August, which means that the first week of the month is coming up, and I'll be sending out the deeper dive worksheets for the month on grounding. The worksheets are printable and they offer reminders about all these different creative ways to practice grounding throughout the month. So you could print it out and stick it up on your fridge so you'll see it, and then remember to feel your feet while you're washing the dishes, just as an example. The worksheets are free. You just have to be on my email list to get them because I send it out in a PDF form so you can easily print it from there. And you can go to movedtomeditate.yoga to sign up, my website, or just look for the link in the podcast description or the show notes. I'll put one there. Okay, let's get into this. So what does it mean to be grounded? We use the term a lot. I have used the term for years, and many of us have kind of an intuitive sense of what it means to us. But more than once, I've actually had a student ask me, you keep using this word ground, like what do you mean by that? And it's such a fair question. To me, there are a few different dimensions of what grounding refers to. I think on one level, it refers just really simply to being in the present moment, like having our attention grounded and stable in the here and now. I also think it implies a sense of connection to or recognition of our surrounding environment. Like, I know when and where I am. This involves our exteroceptive senses, right? Which is our ability to see the objects and features around us and notice them, to use our eyes, our ears, to hear the sounds around us and be aware of that. You could also call that external mindfulness. And we can use external cues to come back to the present in ordinary moments of just spacing out or being on autopilot. And it's also used as a technique to help someone when they're really dissociating to call them back to the current place and time by helping them to notice things like, oh, I'm sitting in this room. It has brown carpet. There's a window. It has red curtains. I'm hearing a bird chirp outside the window. I'm hearing a fan running inside. The lights are bright and it's warm in here. So kind of going through a list of what we're sensing, that level of noticing can really help us to be less lost in whatever world our mind might be creating. And that's a form of grounding. And then another important element of grounding, and why we might call it grounding as opposed to just calling it presence, which that word might actually cover what I've said so far. But grounding also includes the literal ground. So noticing the feeling of support beneath us, the earth element, the structure, stability, hardness, those qualities, that which holds us. We can feel that gravity is happening, that there's this downward force on our planet, but we can also find stability on the ground. We can push into it, we can rest on it, we can leverage it, we can root to rise, as they say. So part of grounding is how we relate to the actual ground. And then lastly, the last piece of what I would consider full grounding is being grounded within the body, our interoceptive awareness or internal mindfulness. Being able to feel ourselves from the inside out and generally having some capacity to be connected and responsive to our physical experience. And when we feel grounded on these different levels, there is a sense of wholeness and presence and steadiness and clarity. And some of these aspects of grounding may be more or less accessible to us, depending on what's going on or depending on other nervous system factors or what our neurological wiring is like, our trauma history and how active it is at the moment, our personality, our learning style, whether we're interested in embodiment or not, previous practice we might have done with things like this. There's a whole world of different things that might affect how accessible these different types of or aspects of embodiment and grounding are to us. So grounding has a lot of different levels and layers and a lot of different entry points. It strongly relates to how we regulate the nervous system. It's very connected to that, and how we experience ourselves energetically. When we are ungrounded, we usually feel something like we might describe it as like being up in our head, or maybe the thinking process feels kind of buzzy and busy. Our breathing might be higher up in the body, like kind of chest and shoulder breathing. Maybe we feel kind of dizzy or even disconnected from the physical place we're inhabiting, like we can see it, but we don't really see it. We're not really taking it in. And most of us probably have some measure of this ungrounded feeling like every day. And what I've just described might feel kind of more like your familiar baseline of buzz and speed and upward energy. Right? Might just feel like what it's like to drink a bunch of coffee and go to work, right? So some of that is because there are so many aspects of modern life that pull us away from the sense of being grounded. Our nervous systems are incredible ancient technologies designed to protect our survival as mammals, and they are going to need more than a few decades to catch up to our rapid technological evolution. Biology just doesn't move that fast. Our nervous systems are seriously just learning how to deal with being able to fly on an airplane, being able to see and talk to someone on a screen who's thousands of miles away, which is super cool, but our nervous system does not know what that is. It's just catching up with our ability to hear massive amounts of news and vivid detail from around the world, from near and far, on a daily basis, and all day, every day, 24/7 if we want to. And then there's social media, right? Love it, hate it. Sometimes it's just like a reactivity machine with literally has an algorithm that's designed to play on and amplify reactivity. And that's how you get popular posts that go viral, right? So culturally, we do value busyness and speed, and often we attribute, success to qualities of busyness and speed. And slowing down to ground is treated as like an afterthought or maybe a luxury. And those values are reflected in a lot of the like really bad communication and bad behavior, simple bad driving, the massively misplaced priorities on a individual and collective level, inhumane policies, the general struggle and dukkha of our society, right? It's like one big collective ungrounded nervous system. And some of us are like, hey, maybe we don't have to live like that. So if that's you, it's really helpful to have practices that reconnect us with our tangible, earthly, bodily presence and our clarity. So if you are feeling ungrounded, if you felt ungrounded today, it's not your fault. There are all these things stacked against us, but we do have practices that we can do. And I would say that for me to be grounded is probably a more realistic goal or aspiration than the goal of being calm all the time. I'm probably not going to be calm all the time because we're going to respond. We're going to react to what goes on around us, and we have to participate in the life that's coming in our way, right? So knowing how to get grounded and to reground again and again and again gives us a flexible steadiness and an ability to return to center. Feeling grounded might feel calm, but to have this, relationship with the ground doesn't mean we have to be calm all the time, if that makes sense. So I think being grounded is a good goal, or having an ability, having some tools around being grounded is a good goal. This is really like another way of describing equanimity, right? And maybe it's kind of more of a poetic way of describing equanimity, like this idea of being grounded, like feeling rooted, like a strong tree that can sway in the wind above its earthly foundation. So let's talk about some ways we can access this experience of grounding. I am a big fan of practicing grounding proactively, even when it doesn't seem like I need it. I probably do. And if I don't need it now, I will need it later. So I'm training myself to be mindful of those internal states, to track that, to notice when I'm getting off balance, to train my nervous system, and just getting more familiar with how to respond. And the more we practice these tools, the better they work. That way, when you are off balance or something comes along that disturbs your sense of feeling grounded, you know what your go-tos are. You know your go-to ways of getting regrounded. So I'm going to name a whole bunch of different ways you might play with grounding. Some things are, things you might do in a yoga or mindfulness class. Others are just more like regular life practices. Maybe some things that you already do, but now you can layer in this intention of grounding and maybe even benefit from it a little bit more with that intention. So my suggestion is to just take a few of these that sound interesting and start there. You can always expand your repertoire later, but you don't have to do them all. It's really like a menu because different things work for different people and people are drawn to different ways of grounding, and that's well and good. So I have like 9 of these to give you. Buckle up. Here we go. The first one is the category of breath practices. Breath practices are a great way to talk to our nervous system, a great way to shift state, to affect the body, mind together. And what I do want you to be aware of is that different breathing practices have different effects. So not just any breathing, but for grounding purposes, you will want to focus on breath work that's about slowing down the breath, or just finding a smooth and even quality to the breathing, and breathing lower in the body. So as in like letting the abdomen move, unclenching the stomach muscles so your abdomen will move. And that way it's not just chest breathing and breathing really high in the body. So it could be as simple as that. It doesn't necessarily have to be like an elaborate technique. It could just be slow breath, smooth, even breath, breathing lower in the body. And that's going to help establish this sense of being more grounded. If you do want to play a little bit more with elaborate breath practices, I would say you either want to equalize the lengths of your inhales and exhales so that they're the same ratio. Like if you breathe in for 4 counts, you breathe out for 4 counts, keeping them the same. Or you could also make your exhales longer than your inhales. So you want to do emphasizing the exhale for grounding, because the exhale slows our heart rate. It helps us get out of fight-flight state, and that helps us to feel more grounded. The opposite is true if you're feeling like dull and sleepy and sluggish and you need an uplift of energy. You would emphasize the inhale. So that's good for that, but you just be aware if your intention is grounding, you probably want to either equalize in and out breath or extend the exhale. I wouldn't really go into breath practices that involve any holding of the breath unless you're really experienced with breath work, just because it can have the opposite effect if you are kind of getting tangled up in breath holding patterns and the tendency to hold your breath. It can have an unintended effect, and it isn't really necessary for the intention of getting more grounded. So I would keep it simple and just think slow, even, low in the body, and exhale. Slow, even, low, and exhale. I don't know if that spells a good acronym, but slow, even, low, and exhale. SELE. That's what you need for your grounding breath. Okay, secondly, I would highlight the feet and what some people call earthing. So that just could be making a point many times a day to feel your feet. Making a point of feeling the feet. Doing movements or activities that generate sensations in your feet, like massaging your foot on a therapy ball or a tennis ball. Noticing your feet when you're walking or standing at the sink washing dishes. Earthing takes this outside, and it's just putting your bare feet on the ground and taking some time to feel the connection. Feel your feet touching the ground, touching the grass, touching the dirt, touching the sand. Feel the sensations. And maybe imagining that you're absorbing some steady, supportive earth chi through your feet. It's really lovely. So that's feet and earthing. Feet being low in the body help us to bring our attention down, and that's grounding. And I would also, as far as bringing that into a meditation practice, would recommend standing and walking meditation. So standing meditation is a big part of Qigong, and it's also named in the Buddhist texts, the early Buddhist texts, as one of the main postures for practicing mindfulness. So standing can be your meditation posture. For yoga practitioners, it's kind of like mountain pose, maybe with a bit more of a relaxed tone, so that you can hold it for a few to several minutes as a meditation practice. And then there's walking meditation. You all know, if you've listened to the podcast, that I love walking meditation because I've talked about it so many times here. But it's wonderful for feeling your feet on the ground, feeling the weight shifts between feet, sensing your relationship with gravity, feeling the muscles in your legs, and also including your external senses in the practice, like the hearing and the seeing of where you're walking and the environment you're in. This is a great mindful grounding practice. If you want more walking meditation instructions, look up some of the other podcast episodes where I've mentioned it. I know there was episode 15 where that was all about walking meditation, so I talk about it in detail. And there's also some guided practices in the Move to Meditate class library if you're a member there and you want to dig into this particular suggestion for grounding. Okay, so that's the first 3. We've got some more. Okay, I would say when you're doing asana, yoga or mindful movement practice, or you're doing sitting meditation, when you're on your mat, basically, pay attention to foundations. That's another way to highlight grounding in your formal practice time, to really emphasize and notice foundations, like feeling your feet in the standing poses, feeling your hands and shins when you're in tabletop. Like, what's touching the floor? Paying attention like this can also help make your poses more stable, which is a great benefit. And when you're seated in a yoga pose or in a meditation posture, you can notice the foundations there too, just for purposes of grounding. What's touching the ground? What's touching your cushion? What's touching the chair? Where's the contact? Your sitting bones, it could be your legs, it could be your feet. Noticing those contact points. Okay, and then the next one is about when we're practicing meditation or shavasana and what we do with our eyes. So if you like to practice with your eyes closed, try this. Consider taking some time before you close your eyes to let your nervous system connect with the external environment. So it's really simple. It just means looking around. This is sometimes called orienting. And just being present to your space, seeing what's around you, letting your nervous system register that things are safe. And then you can decide if you do want to close your eyes for the rest of that practice. Another one that's great can be touch. Touch can be very grounding. It often helps us to feel and connect to the body in the present moment. Self-touch can do that, or the feeling of touching an object and sensing the contact. Kind of like what I was mentioning in the foundations, right, of the pose you're doing, feeling that contact. But it could also be like feeling a yoga prop, like a block under your hand, or feeling a massage ball in your shoulder, or sitting under a weighted blanket, right? Touch. Receiving touch from another person, or petting your cat or dog, that can also be very powerful. Holding someone's hand, hugging, getting a massage. Nervous systems vibe off each other. It's called co-regulation. So we can help each other be grounded in the present simply by being in the same room, but touch can also be a really great way, if possible, to access ground. Okay, another one. I mentioned earthing before when I was talking about grounding through the feet, but I want to put a whole other category around plants and nature and getting outside as part of a grounding practice. So that could look like gardening, growing things, or if you're more indoors oriented, watering your plants. It could be getting outside for a walk or going hiking. If you follow me on Instagram, you know that's one of my favorites. I love to go out and get my dose of vitamin tree. But nature, outside, being with things that grow, for many of us, that is one of the most powerful ways to create an internal shift, to appreciate how much the earth supports us. It can alter our perspective and help to steady the nervous system. During 2020 and the first year of the pandemic, when I was dealing with having a shut down brick and mortar yoga studio, I had the good fortune to be offered a community garden plot. After 7 years of being on the waiting list, it was great timing. So just digging in the dirt felt great, and seeing how I could plant seeds or put seedlings in the ground, and with the right water and sunlight and fertilizer, they would grow. That was very reassuring that something on this planet still made sense. It still worked like it was supposed to. Life still works. But notice what the effect is on your nervous system when you spend time outdoors or you spend time with plants. So I've got 2 more for you. We're doing good. This one is about tending to home. Your home, your nest. It can be a huge source of grounding. And have you ever noticed that when you relocate or you go through a big move, that it takes a while to settle and really feel at home in the new place? It's ungrounding. That doesn't mean it's bad. Sometimes change is needed and getting unstuck does feel destabilizing for a while, but then we get to reground. Those of you who have studied the chakra system, by the way, will probably be noticing that a lot of these grounding suggestions are very first chakra related. So taking time to care for your home, to keep it somewhat orderly, not chaotic, whatever your measure of that is, that can be really grounding. We want to make it so that when we come home, we kind of go, I'm back in my safe haven. That supports a feeling of being grounded and allows our home to support balance and give us a platform for grounded presence in our life. And lastly, I'll recommend working with routine and structure. And this depends very much on the person and knowing yourself and how you thrive. Some people like a lot of structure. Some people feel really constricted by having too much of their day pre-planned. Everyone has to figure out how this works for them individually and find that balance of not too loose, not too tight. For example, for me, I don't like to have my whole day completely scheduled out. I have like a whole list of things I want to do, but I like to be able to move them around. But I very much tend to eat at predictable times, and that's not super negotiable. I get too hungry. But it also helps by giving my day some bones, some structure, and then the other things can be flexible and move around that. So having some kind of predictability and routine in a way that works for you is very grounding. Maybe it's that you have a certain morning ritual or self-care practices that you do in the same way and at the same time every day. Maybe it's based around the times in the day when you need to go walk your dog. The point is you can use the activities of your day to create grounding routines. Okay, so that was like 9 categories of suggestions, each of which probably has a world of different things you can play with. So I hope you feel inspired by some of those ideas for grounding practices. Let's have fun with this month. I would love to hear how you practice grounding, if some of these ideas resonate with you, and if you have others to share, I would love to hear about that too. I'll be sending out the 3-page deeper dive worksheets on this topic of grounding during the first week or so of August. So if this is something you know you want to work on, just be sure you're signed up for the newsletter and you'll get all the upcoming resources like these worksheets and some guided meditations later on this month. The link again is in the show notes, and there are sign-up forms on my website at movedtomeditate.yoga. And I always say this because people can listen to these episodes months or years, who knows, later. So if you missed this August 2022 newsletter, but you still like the worksheet, you can just email me and I'll be happy to send it to you and add you to the list for future months. And my email is on my website, movedtomeditate.yoga. Okay, thank you again, as always, for being here, for listening, for the practices you do that make the world less of a crazy, ungrounded place. Enjoy your practice until next time. So that's today's episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with a friend and/or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and help others find us that way. To learn more about my work, the Moved to Meditate class library, live online classes, teacher trainings, and private lessons, go to movedtomeditate.yoga. Thanks so much for listening.